on the their perceptions of the strengths and weaknesses of the charter, and to keynote this part of the program. We're very fortunate to have Hugh Reynolds give a defining remarks. I am not, I often kid around with you, but I'm not kidding around when I say he's the, maybe the longest serving observer on the scene today of Ulster County politics and government. We have some other distinguished journalists with us, but Hugh's been at it in Kingston a long time. He's perceptive. He says what he thinks, which isn't always the same as what I think. But he says what he thinks, straightforward and honest, and I'm very pleased that he's agreed to speak on this subject. Then we're going to follow with remarks by my about 5 minutes each, not necessarily in reaction, but on the topic by Marianne Collins. We're going to proceed from the far right. Marianne's unusually situated for her. She's on the far right. and Elliot Auerbach, our controller, Marianne, who was a colleague of mine on the commission and a great friend, and Dave Donaldson, who is critically important as legislative chair in charter adoption, and Wayne Harris, a long-serving legislator and a thoughtful person about the operation of county government from the legislative perspective. So we'll start with Hugh Reynolds. Hugh.
Please hold the applause. Sorry. I don't want pity applause. Jerry, thank you for inviting me to this symposium, and thank you for giving me the only A I ever had in college. I took a course from Jerry before most of these buildings were up, so as he says, I go back a long way, and so does he. You're going to get a somewhat different view of some of the things you've already heard of 2 or 3 times, this charter stuff. In reviewing the list of speakers and so forth, most of the people here, understandably, are people, in fact, yes, most of the people except for one, are people who have had a role in the process, either as commissioners, former legislators, people involved in the drawing of the administrative code. It's kind of interesting. I have the 2 documents with me, not for reference, but just to show you. This is the charter itself, and this is the administrative code, which is almost twice as long. So it took a lot of interpretation. Not that Jerry and his people didn't do a good job, but as they pointed out, it required some definition. In any case, you've heard a lot of history about this charter. I'll repeat some of it and hopefully bring some different insight into the process. It was twice a very controversial subject. In 1979, when it was decisively defeated, and in 2006, when it was barely approved by about 3.5%, with less than 40% of the eligible voters who voted that year voting for it. So there was, it would be difficult to call it the People's Charter because so few people actually voted for it, about 20%. Reform requires a reason. The reason for this reform, clearly, as has been pointed out, was the Ulster County jail debacle. A fractured, dysfunctional legislature proved incapable of managing the largest construction project in county history. The results are a matter of record, which you've heard. as the county executive and Professor Benjamin have pointed out, we will be paying upwards of $6 million a year in debt service for about the next 20 years. So it's not a $95 million project. With interest, it's a $120 million project. While some legislators faced embarrassing questions on their failure to adequately supervise this project, the jail, and a few were called before a grand jury, none were ever indicted for malfeasance. None. One person was indicted for a misdemeanor, and that was dismissed because of a statute of limitations issue. What fueled the charter movement in 2005 and 2006 was the demand for accountability. In times of crisis, we typically look for the quote-unquote strong man to set things right, to protect us against future abuse. Thus, the county executive. That he has brought order and purpose out of confusion and drift cannot be denied. The record is clear. Before moving on to the strengths and weaknesses of this comparatively new system, only in effect since January of 2009, let us give the old system some due. And there's some legislative chairman here who worked under that old system. Under that old system, which is repeatedly denigrated these days, we built and financed the county's major infrastructure: the college, the community college, the county office buildings, road and bridges, the old jail, the infirmary, mental health facilities, records management facilities, social services headquarters, and on and on. Under the legislative administrative system, inaugurated in 1981, there was a considerable expansion of social programs and law enforcement initiatives. As Mrs. Lincoln might have observed, the exception was a doozy, the jail. But this should not dismiss the accomplishments. This is not, that there was excessive cronyism and featherbedding is hardly foreign to any kind of government. The executive form of government has numerous inherent strengths. Foremost, as has been mentioned, it is democratic. Voters in the tens of thousands throughout the county cast ballots for the person they choose to be the chief executive. In 2008, somewhere close to 70,000 people voted for that office, with Mike Hine getting about 45,000 of that. It was pretty decisive. Under the legislature system, the legislature chairman acting as CEO could be elected in a district with less than 2,000 votes, and it's happened. Moreover, he was accountable only to the people who elected him, which has been demonstrated. Something like 2% of the registered voters in the county, in addition to a majority of the legislature. The executive system gives the people one voice in addition to their legislature, a voice that can address the concerns of multiple legislative districts. Indeed, for the entire county, the executive's response to the defilement of the Esopus, which just aggravates the hell out of me to drive by the Esopus Creek and see the mud. His response to that is one example of a leader who can quickly respond to an issue. Under the legislative system, it would have taken the combined efforts of almost a dozen legislators to open a dialogue with New York City water authorities, which probably would not have happened. With a staff of experienced professionals, the Office of Executive is well equipped to address almost any issue that arises, and as Mike Hine pointed out, to quickly address issues. In dealing with the issues of the executive branch, it is difficult to separate the man from the office, as it is with the legislature. Suffice it to say, this executive does not operate much differently than executives in Dutchess and Orange counties. I should say at the onset that history has demonstrated the near impossibility of legislating morality, which is to say human behavior. Some things are just natural. Some people call it politics. A review of the recent controversy regarding the nursing home in Kingston may serve to illustrate some of the weaknesses and strengths of the Office of Executive. A year ago, the executive formally asked the legislature to adopt a policy on the future of Golden Hill. Rarely one to stand on the sidelines, the executive advised that the facility was in need of some $40 million in repairs, and it would run operating deficits in the millions for the foreseeable future. Pretty much framed the discussion in the legislature. The Special Legislative Committee eventually reached similar conclusions. It produced 9 options, including the county retention of ownership and operation, but offered no recommendations. The executive chose to act, as later revealed, while the Legislative Committee was considering its options. The executive was, with no notice to the committee, apparently, hiring an Albany-based law firm to develop the what is now the Limited Development Corporation policy. Rather late in the game, literally the 10th month of the 11th hour, the county comptroller raised the kinds of questions that, had the executive chosen to share with the legislature, might have been addressed in a much more timely manner. In fact, there was very little time to address this major policy issue. It's hard to imagine that the framers of the charter would have condoned this kind of procedure on a major policy decision. The democratically elected executive, in fact, excluded the legislature and the public in a decision-making process. Can it be argued that in the end, the public good was served? Who knows? There is no question that real transparency was lacking in this case. For you who don't know what I do, I'm a newspaper reporter and a columnist. So my view is from the outside, where transparency is critical. As noted, it is near impossible to legislate morality, in this case open government, calling, I'll drop that, a rebalance of power in county government is in order. The old 33-member legislature, which gave the new executive carte blanche, is gone. The new 23-member charter-designated legislature must do a better job of monitoring the operations of county government. Some may call this micromanaging or meddling. Others have called it an inherent responsibility. By charter, these are just recommendations. By charter, the executive should be required to issue quarterly financial reports to the legislature, and those reports should include new hires, dismissals, and retirements by title. By charter, the executive should be required, in my view, to issue semi-annual reports to the public on the state of county affairs rather than once a year. Things change pretty much more rapidly these days than they used to, and a year is a long time. Executive veto power is an issue. While 2/3 is the rule for overrides, typically, this gives undue leverage to the executive, where even the threat of a veto can influence legislative action. Tax cap legislation approved by the state legislature last year allows for a 60% override by a school district or a government. That should be sufficient for Ulster. Downsizing the legislature from 33 to 23 was long overdue, but why stop there? I believe the commission that is reviewing the charter should consider the fact that 8 legislators ran without opposition this year, and an equal number ran in districts where there was little competition. To me, that indicates a dearth of candidates. That's a problem across the board. 17 legislators, in my view, would be sufficient for a legislator now almost solely responsible for making policy. In fact, the old legislator had a lot of things to do. The new legislature, much less. The charter the charter provision that county departments can only be eliminated via referendum should be removed. The legislators and the executive are elected to make those decisions. The method of revising the charter should be amended. Giving the executive 5 votes on an 11-member commission again places too much power in the hands of one person. One of the strengths of this charter is its system for reapportionment, a process that can be held up as a role model for other municipalities and state government. It should be formalized as the preferred method for revision of the charter itself. In other words, which they have moved through is to the legislature appoints three people, the executive appoints 3 people, and those 6 people name their 7th person. That worked, I felt like, and I covered almost all the meetings of the Reapportionment Commission. That worked very well. The office as controller, as defined by the charter, needs to be something more than a super treasurer with subpoena power. The watchdog, so-called, needs the staff to do his job. His recommendations need to be given weight. And the office of controllers also sprang from that crisis environment we had lost a great deal of money doing the jail, and we wanted somebody who would be watching those books, who was independently elected. I think that's one of the strengths of the 2006 charter. I should say that in conclusion that despite scholarly reviews like ours and the ongoing work of the Charter Revision Review the Charter Revision Review Commission, fundamental change in what is only a 3-year system in operation is unlikely, given the preponderance of power in the executive branch. That in itself should give pause. I thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you a chair over here. Take your chair over here. Here, take this one.
Marianne Collins is one of the management leaders in the community college and has deep and long political experience.